I'm George Savage, and we're going to call the Town of Portola Valley Finance Committee meeting to order right now. It's 4:08 and Monday, July 13th, and I have an echo. That's coming from, does anyone have a mic open? In the computer, maybe? Okay, yeah, sounds like we're fine now. All right, great. So meeting called to order. By way of explanation for everyone online, we are having Zoom problems, which is why we're 8, 9, 10 minutes late starting the meeting. And I still have an echo, so I'm going to try to resolve that before I keep talking. I am, yes. Okay, testing, 1, 2, test, 1, 2. Trying my missed career as a roadie for a rock band. Test, 1, 2, test, 1, 2. All right, enough fun and games here. First thing to report by way of an announcement for everyone is the agenda says that Chris Rittler won't be here in person, but he is here. So a schedule change that worked out well for us. With that, I will take the roll. George Savage, I'm here. Stephen Casani.
Here.
Ken Levine.
Here.
Chris Rittler.
Here.
In person. Michelle Takai.
Here.
Bill Urban.
Here.
And Mark Wisser is absent today, so we should record that. That's good. We have a quorum, 6 members, which is pretty good given the month and vacations and all the rest. We don't have any oral communication. Well, I should ask if we have any oral communications for items not on the agenda. Anybody? Nobody here in the room with a hand up. Don't see any hands online. Okay, we will proceed to item 3. No announcements or presentations today. Item 4, for minutes, you'll note that we have 2 sets of minutes. The June 2nd minutes were not included in the packet for our June 30th meeting, so we were unable to approve them last meeting earlier this month, so we'll hopefully approve them now. So I'm sure the members have read both sets of minutes, so we'll start with minutes for June 2nd, and if there are no objections or corrections, do I have a motion to approve those?
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, same process for the minutes of the June 30th meeting. Any corrections, additions, or a motion to approve?
I move to approve. Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we've approved the minutes, which is great. We have 2 items of business in the new business issue. One is an update on our audit status, which I'm sure is very important for everyone. And then we're going to continue a discussion that we initiated at the back half of our last meeting earlier in June about the structural deficit and what we need to do about it. And again, the town council are the decision makers on this, and they're working on this as well. If you haven't, I encourage everyone to look back at our meeting from earlier this month, as well as town council meetings going on, which are all up on YouTube, and there are summaries. But here we want to have the finance committee get a bit more in depth and give you our impressions of different options. We'll start with item 5A, the audit update. And with that, I'll ask Tony to let us know where we stand.
Yeah, thank you, George. So the last council meeting and the previous finance committee meeting, you reviewed the 22-23 audited financial statements. So they have been accepted by council and they are now on our website. We've had a conversation with Mays, our town auditor, and we will attempt to do fiscal year 23-24 and 24-25 concurrently, with a target date of both audits being accepted or being brought to the finance committee by October 15th, which means the council will accept at the second meeting in October. So we'll have 23-24 and 24-25 done concurrently. The Mays has agreed to expedite the processing. There is a catch. The It's going to be reviewed by senior partners, so the cost is going to be a little high. But we believe this is a cost that's worth every penny. And also it will come at some sacrifice on my part because I will have several late nights and weekends ahead of me for the foreseeable future. But this is something that needs to get done. And but that's the audit update for the next or the last two fiscal years. So with that completed in October, we will then be complete through 24-25 and we'll be, for all intents and purposes, caught up. And then 25-26 for that scheduling, we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
That's really good news. And I just want to comment to everyone that hats off to a lot of people here. Tony, of course, for doing a lot of extra work. Town council for also participating and discussions in a very productive way. I was involved as well, talking to Mays and Associates and having them free up some senior partner time. I mean, one of the issues is that their associates get booked up and the regular audit schedule pretty much consumes everyone's time, except there is a partner who has some time, albeit not for the junior people, but provided we were able to pull out all the stops. And here we really means Tony and his team in order to be extremely responsive and on very tight timelines to accelerate getting these audits done. And we view this, certainly I do, as a terrific opportunity to kind of get this done with and get ourselves up to date. Yes, please. Mayor Taylor wants to say something.
There's also hands raised for public comment.
So I just wanted to add that Tony's going to forego a vacation to do this. So that's the level of dedication that we're getting from Tony. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask a question? So when will the council meet after that October 15th meeting?
It'll be the second Thursday. So it'll be the last Thursday of October. So it'll be,
That's good. So in other words, they're going to have a chance to see them and approve them before the election.
correct,
The following week. Very good.
correct. It'll be October 28th.
Any more clarifying questions up here at the dais before I go to the public? Okay, we have a couple of hands up online. I don't see anyone here in the room. So let's start with Rita. I think you were first, and then we'll go to Betsy after you.
Okay, just a quick, I guess, operational type question. We would have budgeted to get these things done since 2020, since they haven't been done, or 2019. Compared to now the new costs, the new potential costs, what is that difference that we're going to have to pay? Is it over $100,000 that we're going to have to pay to rush this, compared to what we've had budgeted to do our audit, which we're probably way over that amount that we would have paid if they were done in a timely way? Just trying to figure out what's going to be the hit on our already hit budget for. And Tony, no, you were not there when all of these things were happening, but this does affect money as it clears up some money issues. Thank you.
Thanks. You want to comment on that?
It's going to be about an additional 70,000 on top of what we've already budgeted. So.
Yeah, and of course, 70,000 is not chicken feed by any means, but I view this as a significant plus, an opportunity to get ourselves all caught up, because the alternative would have been to have this continue to drag out until it could be fit in the normal course of events, which has already taken far too long. So not ideal, but it's certainly good to get it done, in my opinion. Betsy, you're next.
Yes, thank you so much. I just wanted to say it's 70,000 plus Tony's vacation. So we all you have my enthusiastic support for this. The cost will be borne by all of us, but thank you, Finance Committee and and town council members for backing Tony in what was a very important and I think a consequential decision. So way to go, team PV Finance. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Betsy. Let's see, I thought I saw another hand there for a moment, but I don't see it now. Going once? Going twice? Okay. I think that's all the comments. Any more discussion up here? All right, we'll move on to the main topic for today. With
And George, I do have a brief presentation.
exactly,
Yeah.
and I was going to hand it to you for that. So please, Tony will take us through a presentation of where we are and what we're dealing with, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay, this is a presentation that was presented to council at their last meeting. Where the discussion on the draft ordinance was held. Okay. So as a reminder, this is the council priorities. This is what the budget was prepared with. Most of these priorities are carryovers from the last two previous fiscal years. New one added this year was community. So looking at some of the long-term needs based on these council priorities, number one being the financial responsibility and long-term viability. We are not fiscally sustainable at the moment. And also with increased revenues, we can also have some long-term financial planning that includes building up reserves, pension management, and also addressing some long-term structural inefficiencies related to our facilities and our infrastructure. And then also with safety, that's our sheriff's contract, our wildfire resiliency, and we do have an evacuation plan that's been adopted, and we currently have no resources to implement anything on that evacuation plan. Also, other items are emergency power backup and cooling centers. These are some of ideas that came up with the sustainability priority. Operational efficiency and effectiveness, obviously demonstrated today with our IT infrastructure. We did make some significant investment in our IT. Also, other operational efficiencies, employee development, retention, and some grant writing capabilities, because some of these long-term needs will also be funded through use of grants. We currently don't have any type of grant writing capability within our resources. Community, like I said earlier, with the facilities, our town courts, Ford Field, also just the town center itself. Our facilities are aging. Maintenance costs are increasing. We're also pushing back on some maintenance because the cost is getting a little prohibitive. And we have to do some modernization as well to take advantage of some new technologies. And then again, with sustainability, developing a climate action plan that prioritizes some long-term strategies to reduce our vulnerability to climate related hazards like fire. And then on our capital improvement program, first on the list is the Alpine Road widening. This is a direct result of the evacuation plan. Also, we have streets and roads that require an annual $350,000 from the general fund in maintenance of effort requirements. Otherwise, we lose our SB1 funding, which is about $120,000 to $125,000 per year. This is directly related to any type of transportation within the town. And also our vehicle fleet is significantly aging. The youngest truck we have is 12 years old. We have about 3 or 4 that are over 15 years old. And there is a mandate from the state to go with a clean vehicle fleet that went into effect in 2025. We've had conversations, and there will be one on the Ford Field bathroom and concession stand. That'll be going to council next month. Then we also have town courts resurfacing. And then there's other items on this list as well. So looking at the excuse me, the strategic investment priorities for each of the priorities here. Yes, we do need to focus on a long-term fiscal sustainability plan. And then with safety, the sheriff's contract is going to be there. It's not going away. And it's going to be pretty hard for us to reduce the costs of that contract. Also, we have to make some investments with our wildfire management in regards to mitigating the fuel. We do have that with a contract with Side Fire. It's currently 60 days this year. It was 80 days in prior years. And then with responsible land use, we have our housing element updates and all our other element updates that are required by the state. So looking at revenue from the real property transfer tax, the range is about 2.3 million to 3 million. And it's made up of recovering the cost increases from the sheriff's contract of 1.4 million. That's roughly the amount that we have used in credits and one-time funding to offset those increases to the general fund. We no longer have access to those resources. The CIP fund, we need to be funding annually 600 to 900,000, 750,000 is a sweet spot. That's $350,000 for maintenance of efforts with the streets. And that leaves 400,000 available for other of our facilities. And also we can build up some CIP reserve to address our storm drains because that's the next major infrastructure priority that, or I feel is a priority in dealing with our storm drains. Also, we have other operational needs, as I stated earlier, with our IT infrastructure and also with our facilities, town centers, specifically the buildings and town courts and Ford Field. But so the optimal rate to generate 2.3 to 3 million be about $10 per thousand. So why a $10 rate? We'll put the town on a fiscally sustainable path. It's one bite at the apple. The Howard Jarvis tax administrative initiative is not going to go away, even though it's not on the November ballot. They do have the legislature's attention. So there's going to be some more working with that. And there will probably be coming back to restrict further taxes from the legislature. As I stated earlier, it recovers 1.4 million in prior year cost increases from the sheriff's contract. It will allow us to make about $750,000 in investments to our CIP plan, and then $300,000 to $700,000 for ongoing operating expense increases. And the $10 per 1,000 polled at 60+% in the fall 2025 survey. Baked into the transfer tax ordinance are exemptions that are within our own municipal code. And these are compliant with the state law. We can add exemptions. We can limit exemptions. Since it's part of the code, these can be done annually through code updates, not requiring any type of vote of the electorate. Like the city council can, or excuse me, the town council can amend the code at any time. What if the $10 rate generates too much? Council can reduce the rate without a vote. Council can also reduce the utility UUT rate without a vote. And council can also later reinstate back to the original amount without a vote. The only time a vote would be needed if we were to increase, say, the UUT from 7.5% or the real property transfer tax rate of $10. And council direction that we received at the last meeting was the 2.33 million is needed, and that we're to keep the ordinance simple for the vote. And that concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you. I think the way we'll try to proceed is, as in prior discussions, clarifying questions for Tony about the facts. Then we'll hear from members of the public, and then we'll have a discussion after we've heard from both Tony's clarifications and the questions, comments from the public. Okay, clarifying question.
Yeah, I have a couple. The dollar signs in parentheses, I assume means the dollar impact of each of the items. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if it's 3 S's, it's about 100,000. If it's 4 S's, it's in the millions.
So I'm just curious, the sheriff contract is 2 versus emergency backup power and cooling centers at 3.
Right? So the sheriff's contract is the increase per year.
So emergency backup power and cooling is more than that increase?
Well, it'll be a one-time cost for implementing purchasing of equipment and installation.
Okay. And then in terms of getting to that 2.5 to 3, that includes kind of this entire, I'll call it a wish list of potential priorities. Was there ever a discussion of not increasing it that much? The 2.3 to 3 sounds higher than any number I think we discussed previously, although maybe I missed it.
Yeah, as we've gone through this conversation over the last couple of years, it was, we didn't talk about storm drains when we first started about this conversation. It wasn't until later. And then it was the IT infrastructure. So there was items that we were discussing internally and with council over the past couple of years that these are things that we do need to address in the next 5 to 10 years. And having that funding in place will help us with those issues.
Does the exemption for community property divisions, would that same kind of exemption apply to, say, inheritance? Somebody is passing the property to their children, or is that?
No, that came up because there's the assessed value and then there's market value. So if there's any type of transfer of property for inheritance, the assessed value can be, there's state law that can limit you can transfer the assessed value, but the market value is still what's going to determine the transfer tax rate.
Okay. So heirs would have to come up with the money.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
I
Yeah.
believe so.
Can we do something about that?
Yeah. Yeah. If it's an actual sale, if there's a sale. Yeah, that wouldn't trigger transfer. That wouldn't be an exemption, wouldn't trigger transfer tax.
Right. Okay. That's what I was
It's
just trying to
it's
make
whatever
sure.
triggers the transfer tax,
Okay, that doesn't
an actual
transfer.
sale.
Right. So if somebody dies and in their will, it's left to their son or daughter or
Right.
what have you, provided there's no sale by the heirs,
Right.
the heirs don't pay a tax.
Right.
Okay, I want to be clear about that because a
Yes.
lot of people would be concerned
Right.
about having to come up with $50,000 or
So
something.
whatever is going to trigger
Okay,
the transfer tax, that's going to be assessed at market value.
okay, that's helpful.
Just a couple of clarifying questions. First of all, whose presentation is this? Town council's or town manager?
Mine.
Sure.
Yes.
So I'll call it town manager.
Yeah.
So this is based on the input of listening to town council plus, you've been here.
Public comment,
Yeah,
finance committee. Yeah.
And then, how big's our deficit this year?
It's a little bit under 700,000.
Right. And that was with, we already added some additional projects, right? That in prior years we had foregone by doing tightening of the belt.
When you say projects, are you referring to capital projects or are you referring to?
Everything. I mean. we
Yeah,
did
well, I mean, the big
Initiatives like these, we've added some initiatives this year that we didn't have last year. And last year we added some that we didn't have the year before.
the biggest increase was having the sheriff's contract being allocated to the general fund because we no longer had the use of credits or one-time funding sources. So yeah, that was the significant increase, but the other, you take that out, we're still at the same deficit level as we adopted for 24-25, approximately.
Right. And for 23-24, we did a balanced budget, tightened the belt, right? I mean, it was tough.
With some significant cuts, yes. Or I mean, we froze positions and significantly impacted operations.
Okay. I mean, back when we did a balanced budget, one of my comments was, and I'll just go back to this, when you don't have the money, you put together a list of things you want and you prioritize the list and, and then you try to raise money based on those priorities, right? And I feel like we're now almost looking at this concept of additional taxes as a free-for-all to put the initiatives in. So I guess, look, we're not out of a structural deficit, and no one likes increased taxes. So I just think I mean, my recommendation, if I was working on this presentation, would have prioritization and, timeframes and kind of ROI, right? Maybe it's community ROI or whatever, but some value assessment assigned to each of these. And then maybe draw the line at multiple places. This is the $1 million ask. This is the $2 million ask. This is the $3 million ask. Then I think it'd be easier to justify.
Yeah, I think we're getting beyond the clarifying questions. So
Okay,
can
sorry,
we
you're
hold
right,
that
you're
to
right.
after?
But I mean, we're not looking at this as like a Christmas tree. So this is, I mean, the budget,
My opinion is, looks like one. That's why I'm surprised, because in the past, you've done fantastic at this. And I feel like we're a little aspirational in our thinking.
I don't believe it's aspirational to say that we have a problem with our storm drains, and that's going to cost millions.
All right,
And
what-
it's not aspirational that the sheriff's contract is what,
We know that for sure.
and and what you have, the costs in the budget right now on the expense side is how much it costs to provide the services.
Yep.
And if we don't have the revenue to match that, then we have to cut services. And right now, the only way that's going to cut is going to be staff.
So just one clarifying question. I apologize that I went off of clarifying questions. I appreciate you engaging nonetheless. I think it would also be helpful, and maybe it's hard for you to answer this question, but like, how much of this, because most of our tax dollars go to the county,
Right.
and a lot of these projects, when I look at it, I go, why isn't the county contributing to that? So is there county contribution versus a town contribution? I think that would be good clarifying.
If it's within town limits, it's our responsibility.
I don't know, cooling centers for the county?
No, they would be here at town center.
Well, within the county, it's in the pit.
That's a stretch.
All right, but I'm just saying that.
Okay.
I'd like to make certain we get our fair share of county dollars, because
I-
they're taking most of them, right?
I would argue that the amount of money that we give to the county is not being returned in the level of services from the county
Yeah.
to the town.
I think that's
I
where
would
started.
make that argument, but unfortunately, that's just the way the cookie crumbles.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for
Yeah.
clarification.
Yeah, at the last meeting, the Stanford housing came up. Do we have an idea of the timeline of when those houses would come on the market? And has that been factored in at all? It doesn't look like it's factored in at all.
I think they're starting groundbreaking. They want to start.
They want to start later this year, but I'll just emphasize, usually residential, when you do a fiscal impact analysis, it's a net negative from a town or city fiscal standpoint. It costs more to the town to fund the services needed by residential uses than it generates in revenue over the long term. And Stanford generally sells their homes below market value and has long-term tenants that don't turn over. So I would just caution you for thinking that that would actually provide revenue to the town. It will likely be a net negative over the long run. No, sorry, Darcy Smith, town manager. Sorry.
I have a,
Sorry, I should have introduced you.
so I have one, I think it's in the category of clarifying. clarify for us whether a municipal bond offering to handle some of these long-lived assets or projects is feasible, and if so, when that an effort to look at that as another funding or alternative funding source, when that could be launched.
Those are alternatives, option funding sources. There, you can do a revenue bond, but you'd have to have the revenue to fund the bond, or you can do an assessment. That would require, that's a general obligation bond, that would require a vote. And
Excuse me, is that 50% plus one or 2/3?
yeah, if it's a general obligation bond, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're choosing to assess yourself and they'll show up on your property tax.
And do you know what the limitations are on the types of projects that can be used? For example, could that be storm drain repair as opposed to?
Yes, you can, yes. But you can also go through the Prop 218 process and do an annual storm drain fee. Where it's, that's just another way of funding as well.
So looking at your list here, there's quite a number of things that fall into that category of long-lived assets that maybe would be eligible to be funded that way as an alternative, correct?
Right, but then you're going into debt to pay it.
Sure. Do you know what our town's bond rating is? I don't know the last time we had a general obligation bond, or if we ever have had one.
I don't believe the town has had one, or if they have, it's been years. So I don't know if there is a bond rating for the town, because we have not had any type of debt service.
Okay. Well, when we come to discussion, I'll talk a little bit about, I was interested in this as a alternative way, because the number, as some of my colleagues said, is bigger than I had previously seen. And, a general obligation bond, if it ends up on our property tax bill, which is where it would appear, at least we have a chance to deduct it against ordinary income taxes. So the net after-tax cost to residents is less even than a property tax would be, or some other alternatives. Thanks.
I have two clarifying questions. The first is at a high level, there seems to be two very different proposals. Just 2 weeks ago, you made a presentation called Funding Needs and Policy Questions, and it divided costs into ongoing and one time. And it basically came up with ongoing costs of 1.4 million and one-time costs of $1 million. Now, not less than 2 weeks later, we get something very, very different. And my question, I guess, from a clarifying perspective is, why is it so different and what has changed? 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, there are one-time costs also built into what I'm presenting tonight. So nothing's really changed, maybe just how it's being presented, but it's still the same underlying framework.
But the answer is dramatically different. We've gone from from ongoing cost of 1.4 million, which is like $6, to a $10 answer for the rate of the transfer tax. Something must have changed. This is a dramatic difference.
Why don't we?
Something is happening, which I'm concerned. I'd like to know what it is, or explain to me why I'm wrong in my thinking.
Why don't we discuss this after we hear public? Because I think it goes beyond clarifying.
Okay, my second clarifying question, equally that I think, is you've got this number of sheriff services, $1,400,000. And that is correct. If we look at the document that you've prepared in the past of the last 8, 9, 10 years of sheriff's contracts, it's gone up by 1.4 million. But it only went up $853,000 in the change in contract. The rest of it is annual increases. So annual increases are offset by annual increases in property taxes as well. Now, evidently, our property taxes only go up around 5 to 6% a year, but the annual increases, according to your document here, is that it's been 9% in the past. but it was only 1.54% in 24-25 from the previous year, which is the end of the data that I have in front of me.
Mhm.
So it seems to me that the $1,400,000 that you're looking at that we need to cover in the transfer tax is really only $800,000, $853,000.
Yeah, but you're also not including personnel costing, everything that comes out of the general fund, not just the sheriff's contract. And which I presented, we have salary increases, we have benefit increases, we have cost of living adjustments. I mean, our consultants, their costs go up every year. So the change in the general fund this year is because we didn't have another bucket to pay for the sheriff's contract. It's now all being absorbed by the general fund. So the use of the use of credits, the use of ARPA monies, if we didn't have those in place, our reserve would be $1.4 million less than what it is now. So I'm specifically talking about the general fund. And everything comes out of the general fund that covers operations. It's not just the sheriff's contract.
Right, but the numbers, the 1.4 million and the 853,000, which was the bump that we negotiated with the sheriff, are the total cost to the town, not just the general fund.
It's more to the general fund. Yeah.
That the town has done a good job of finding sources of revenue to cover the sheriffs over the last 5-6 years. And that's now needs to be handled by the general fund. But nonetheless, the cost to the town was not $1.4 million. The increased cost from the sheriff is $853,000.
But paying for that without the credits and without the ARPA money would have been $1.4 million more over the last 3 to 4 years than we've paid out of the general fund.
And I agree with that. But what I don't agree with is that the increased cost is composed of both. The increase in cost is $853,000 of that is because the sheriff negotiated a different contract, basically shifted costs to the town. The rest of it is annual increases, which you expect to see. And there are annual increases in every cost that the town covers. Of course, there are annual costs. And they're almost always increases, not decreases.
But you saw that impact in the budget this year when the sheriff's cost alone, we went from a $270,000 deficit to almost a $700,000 deficit, just with the sheriff's contract alone.
In the general fund, but not in the total cost to the town. Because it was covered by different funds.
The general fund pays for over 90% of the sheriff's contract this year.
I made my point. You don't need to.
Can I ask one more clarifying question? Ken started by talking about the difference between the presentation 2 weeks ago and today. And that I thought we were going to do about 1.4 million. I think you said that to get to the 2.4, it's consistent because it includes the million, excuse me, of one-time costs. Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah, the presentation had about 1.4 million of one-time versa. But yeah, I had about 2.4 million total in the presentation a couple weeks ago.
And that includes the 1 million of one-time costs.
Yeah.
So that assumes, I guess, if we're looking to raise 2.4 to 3 on an annual basis, that we're going to have this incremental 1 million every year of one-time costs, but they're really not one-time costs.
Well, it could be allocated throughout the budget for other purposes, other CIP projects, or we have one-time expenses. Housing element is one. But there are, but again, it'll be all through the budget process.
Okay.
And again, and also again, if it's too much revenue, it can be dialed back.
Or the rate can be
Yeah.
reduced. Yeah, I want to get to that in the discussion. If there's no more clarification, let's hear from. Yeah, sure. Before we go to the public, Mayor Taylor wants to clarify a couple of points, and we'll hear from you with your hands up, and then we'll discuss.
So thanks, guys, for your questions. I just wanted to add a couple of things. So on the tax rate, we technically get 4 cents per dollar on property taxes, and then it gets rounded up to 7 cents. So so Chris, that's to your point of every dollar, we only get 7 cents. So that's their piece. The council has been talking a range between 1.5 and 2.5. So that's been something the council has been talking about for a while. The year that we had a balanced budget, Chris, that the only reason we were able to balance it is because we still had money that the county was giving us. If we would have had to pave that out of the general fund, we would have had a deficit that year as well. So that was the reason we got by with that. And then the other thing I would say, when we talked about this at the council meeting, was we're not funding our capital projects right now. Like, we're not putting money into that. So to me, as a council member, that's the scary part to me, is that we just are letting the town, if you will, rot in place, which I don't think at least at the council level, we didn't see that was sort of acceptable. So really a big portion of that, if you looked at Tony's CIP list, those are the things that when we looked and said, wow, there seems like there's a range here of money that we should start putting aside every year to make sure that we're covering that we haven't, like the way we've been balancing the budget is by just not funding any capital. And that's sort of not, we're not going to make it there. So anyway, I just wanted to add that stuff. I mean, I completely appreciate, and it's, the other thing that's hard about this is because we're looking at putting something on the ballot, we can't actually say it's going to pay for X, Y, and Z. You can only talk about this in broad strokes. Now, maybe Chris is right. Maybe it's, the 1.5, the 2, the 2.5, that you have some levels or something, but you can't actually earmark these things. Otherwise, it's not a general obligation. It's a special fund, and then it's a 2/3 vote. So that's the other piece that makes it slightly complicated. So thank you.
Could I ask Ken and Michelle a question? When you did this analysis originally, do you remember what number you recommended? I just couldn't find it in the notes.
Well, it depended on the dollars, how many you were looking for. And
Right, but at that time, we had an assumption of what the dollars were.
well, we were talking about, I think, 1.5 million.
Yeah, that's the number I had in mind.
We were talking about.
I thought we were like at 1.5.
It's about $6.
Yeah.
Which is consistent with the towns now saying they want it to be 10, but to cover 2.5.
Yeah, and and I think that's just, Craig, for your comments and for everybody's, right? I think some of the, I'll say some of the commentary here, I believe, is a number of us worked diligently to find ways to close like a $1.5 million gap. And now there's somewhat of a proposal in the works to do a $3 million. And, I think that's what you're hearing here, just to kind of bridge the gap, right? Is that, I mean, and our budget's not very big, right?
next
So
conversation.
1.5 is a big number. Right?
Yeah. And that should be our next conversation. And part of that, before we hear from the public, just to give you a frame on that, is we're in a hole. We've tried hard to stop digging so much. We need to cover the operating deficit. We have these one-time issues, have to dig out of the hole. So there is the ability to reduce the rate. So we're asking voters to set the maximum rate. And I would assume if this passes, one job of this committee would be to watch these things, recommend that the rate come down if we're digging out of the hole and we've got the money we need. But now I'm discussing too. So let me go first to David Cardinal. We haven't heard from him, and then we'll go to Rita and Betsy and anyone else who puts their hands up, and then we'll come back here to have a frank discussion, as they say in the foreign policy biz. All right, let's go.
Hi, yeah. First of all, I'm a big supporter of the RPTT, and I think given the Jarvis situation, we ought to start at the top if we can get it passed at 1%. I do think we need to rethink how it's presented. First of all, I think part of it, we need to rebuild our reserves, which is a multi-year effort and is fiscally responsible. I think there's restoring the service levels. We have a town hall that's open half the week, et cetera, et cetera. We have 2 maintenance guys instead of 3. So I think restoring the service levels that we think we should have as a town that has money, at least its residents do. On the capital projects, I would lead with things that are like pretty real, like the sheriff's substation. We promised to redo that. We need to redo that. That's $600,000. The storm drains, absolutely, and that's going to be millions. I think things like widening Alpine Road are incredibly speculative, and we have actually zero idea whether they're practical and what they would cost. So I'd caution about leading with those. I'm not opposed to them, but I don't think that's something that can be thrown out there as a reason to raise a lot of taxes. Same for the cooling center. I think that's I don't know, that's a thing, and maybe we want one, but I think we have plenty of dollar expenses that are important, approved, and expected by our town residents, like turnaround on permits or whatever that we can showcase without sort of leading with things that are potentially, I don't know, controversial or speculative. And also mentioning rebuilding our fiscal stability, really, which we don't have. Even with a balanced budget, our reserves are puny. And so I'm all for whatever we can get passed personally. But I just hope we can frame it in a way that we can get it passed. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Next, we'll go to Rita. Rita?
Hi, thank you for taking my comment. I know this is a hard conversation. One of the ideas that residents suggested years ago is to do an audit of all of our contracts because they need to be overhauled. And, you know, with us saying that we're poor, we seem to be able to find money when needed. You know, we need to spend this $70,000 for the higher level auditor people, but that's money we don't have. And if you listen to the news, there's so many fires and there are people dying in the fires. We have an evacuation plan, but how is that communicated with the residents? We have no money for fire mitigation, to take care of things. And those two things are going to take away, put in danger the population that our town then needs the money from. So if we find the money for other things, let's find some money for the evacuation plan so it can be communicated to the residents and for more fire mitigation. Let's prioritize lives. Thank you.
Thanks, Rita. And I see Betsy, you have your hand up too.
Yes, how do you do? Thank you. I very much want to give my appreciation to the level of engagement and discussion that you're having around this item. Getting into the real nitty-gritty here, I see as being highly protective of the outcome that we all want, which is a highly functioning town. One critical item, and thank you very much, Chris Ritter, for bringing out some of these issues, so we can really see, because I too heard the 1.5 million, and I heard it grow to 2 million, but this is the first I've seen 3 million, and that raised my curiosity considerably too. One critical item that did not make the all-important list was specifically spelling out the level of reserves. And I don't recall if we're falling with our spending right now includes the adequate level of reserves that we required. I think we dropped it down to 20% of the year's expenses. But what is it going to be in October when voters are voting, or by November 3rd? I think that would be an interesting number to have and to share with the public, because particularly going into El Nino, super El Nino year, combined with the storm drains, I presume it concerns us all. I also wanted to call out Bill Urban's excellent letter to the town council, I believe it was, of last week, in which he suggested a ballot measure tax alternative of about 3.5% increase in the existing 5.5% UUT general tax. I am going to spin it a little differently than what Bill proposed. Bill proposed it as a straight out either or. It could also be, and this is not quite as simple as I've heard the town council wants to keep this simple, but I think that we are an intelligent enough community to understand if the transfer tax does not pass, we're in deep trouble. And I know the council from conversations is intending to come back with another tax measure as soon as they can, which would be March, which would be a special election, and that would be quite costly. I think Tony shared that it would be around $50,000. So I wondered if the town would consider Bill's alternative, if not as a straight out alternative, as a if then. So if the real estate transfer tax were not to pass, would you support this? It would save us $50,000, and I think it would save a truly deflating for very nervous making months. So there are various reasons I think it's worth discussing. Thank you very much for your attention, and appreciate again your careful consideration.
Thanks, Betsy. Any other hands? Seeing no other hands online, we'll bring it back here for discussion, and I'll just kick it off with just a thought experiment for people to throw fruit at and discuss, which would be running as follows. If we are going with a real property transfer tax, set a rate that would meet the ongoing operating deficit and the one-time items as proposed, and rebuild our reserves and have our reserve policy as it is now, where 20% is the minimum, but 60% is more of a target. And what do I mean by that is housing sales are lumpier than utility usage or real property taxes, which are much more steady. And so we could have a recession or a year where not much sells. So we probably need more of a cash buffer. But of course, if we had a reserve policy of 60%, we couldn't spend that buffer necessarily. So to smooth out the lumpiness, we would have a target. And the target I just dreamed up was what we used to have as our reserve limit of 60. The minimum is 20. And what that means is that when the cash hits 60, then we reduce the rate on the property tax so that we don't go above that. And we continue to manage spending carefully, as this committee is wont to do, and certainly the town council, listening to residents, prioritizing things, saying, no, that's off the list because, that's too expensive, et cetera. And so this rate would be a maximum, but, after a couple of years of catching up, we could expect to reduce it. And that's sort of my 2 cents at this point. And I'd love to hear what people think about it as well as everything else on your mind.
So let me kick this off a little bit. In my opinion, and we've heard a number of the people who spoke from the public here say the same thing. The most important thing that we can do is make sure we pass a revenue issue of some sort, of a reasonable amount of money in November. If we don't, we're in a lot of trouble. And when you ask, you've seen the comments from the members of this committee, that when you raise the rate, the amount of money you raise is negative, and therefore asking for too much money, you're reaching too far, and you may lose everything as a result of reaching too far. I feel that it's just, I'm not the politician here, but it just makes sense to me that if you ask for an RPTT of 6.6% versus one of 1%, you're going to get less people voting for the 1%. And I say that knowing that the survey you took there was an anomaly that you've mentioned before, that people actually voted for, wanted a higher number somehow. I don't think that's going to be the result. I think that it's extremely important that we pass something.
All right. There used to be a town council member and then a member of our committee named Gary Nielsen. And he had this rule about how much the town could realistically spend on capital projects. I forget the number. Well, it was 15 years ago number, but so a lot of these one-time things, following Gary's rule, probably can't be done in a year. And so I don't think we need 2 to 3 million or whatever the suggested amount is. Just because there's not the manpower in town to support the construction or the capital improvements needed. So I am also really surprised from the amount of increase from 2 weeks ago. And I agree with Ken that a lower rate, although I could tolerate $8 or 0.8%, is preferable to the 1%. That's just my feeling.
So where were you at? You were at 6 or 8?
$8 or 0.8.
Okay, 0.8%. Okay, got it. All right.
So I guess I have a question. So I'll direct it to Tony. This is part of the town charter, this RP, Real Estate Property Transfer Tax, RPTT, right?
Yes.
And you laid out in your presentation, I think, some controls that town council would have that wouldn't require a vote.
Right.
Okay, so can you maybe just walk through the scenario of, say we set it for this 10 per thousand. Just walk through, a lot of the concern here is we're overshooting.
Right.
So just walk us through a scenario of we overshoot.
Okay.
Like what's our ability to correct?
So if we overshoot and turns out it is $8, then the town council can reduce the rate through council action. They can reduce the rate from $10 to $8. And then say a few years later, we revenue is under what is needed. Town council can then increase the rate back up to the original rate, or they can raise it to $9. They just can't go above the $10 rate because that would require another vote of the electorate.
So what's the reality of implementing those adjustments? Is that like you could do it quarterly? It has to be an annual decision. I just don't know how these things work. I mean, I think usually tax adjustments are very controlled,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, annually is preferred, but because I think the county would object to having a new transfer tax rate coming in every quarter because they're the ones that are actually collecting it. And then it's going to be timing differences as, oh, you reduced it this quarter, but the sale closed after, but so there's going to be some logistical issues for the county to figure that out. So if you do it annually, it'll be much cleaner.
Have we explored that with the county? Like how much real ability we have to adjust it after we set it? Because one of my concerns is we set it, the county sets up the system to start collecting this new thing that Portola Valley's never done. It starts happening, we overshoot, and then the county says, oh, excuse me, Portola Valley, we can't make a change despite your wishes. So I'm just trying, that's why I'm trying to understand the mechanism.
Well, the county assessor's office, I mean, for property tax, they adjust the rolls once per year.
Okay.
But then anytime there's a reassessment due for whatever reason that triggers it.
It is only taking me
Well,
an hour and 10 minutes to get this on. I don't know what the problem.
This is the Portola Valley meeting?
Yes, somehow I couldn't get it on.
Could you go on mute,
got it.
Linda Craig? We're all hearing you. If you could go on mute, please.
They just mentioned it.
Oh, go on mute.
Yes, please. Thank you. Very good. Thank you so much.
All right, so Tony, I guess netting that out, for clarification, it sounds like realistically, this might become an annual decision.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's way over, I think we can reach out to the county and say, can we do it? Can we change the rate, say January? 6 months into the fiscal year.
I'm just saying, what would we set as far as expectations? Sounds like annual. That's all. That's all I was trying to figure out. So we could correct it after a year.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I add one
Yeah,
other thing?
yeah, please.
One of the things the council decided was whatever rate we decide, it's minus 55 cents. In other words, you're not going to collect the current 55 cents that we get and this on top of it. We just decided it's just going to be one number.
And the 55 cents is the county's tax they have today.
Well, our current rate is 55.
Today, we get 55 cents in transfer tax, like that already exists. And the county gets 55 cents in a transfer tax. So that's today. Okay. So whatever we decide is the new rate, we're going to get rid of our 55 cents. So if we agree to $10, the actual net to us is going to be $9.45.
I mean, why do we have to do that? I mean, the point is you're not going to get credit from the electorate on that. So you're basically charging them more than they're, you know what I mean?
So at the last count, I mean, this discussion is great. I can just say at the last council meeting, that was what the council discussed and decided to keep it simple. We were on this sort of keep it simple mantra. That's the same issue with putting multiple things on the ballot.
I think it's more complicated. I mean,
No, I hear you. I mean, so I think getting this discussion to the council is great. That's where we're having it. I was just trying to explain so everybody knows that that's what the council is thinking about, is that we wouldn't collect the 55 cents. I'm not disagreeing with you necessarily that maybe it would be better just to do plus, and then it would be simpler for the electorate.
Yeah, I'd second Bill's opinion on we're making it too complicated, but just lower the new one. That would be I'd be with Bill on that.
Right, and also if you look at other cities that have a transfer tax like Palo Alto, Mountain View, and San Jose, they left the $1.10 alone. And they only had $3.30. Actually, all three cities started at $3.30. So they're fairly small, but they're keeping the $1.10 times a factor of something. They get to 3.30.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is they get significantly more property tax than we do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit skeptical that any government or very few governments will actually give money back when they're raising much. They tend to find reasons and ways to spend the incremental money. So I'm definitely a proponent of raising what we need and not a dollar more. And I know there's a lot of debate as to what it is we need versus what we want. But I think to Ken's point, I think you're far more likely to be successful at a lower number than a higher, again, despite what some poll might have said. And it does strike me, I mean, this is the first time I've seen this when we got the presentation a few days ago. It does strike me that there's a little bit of a Christmas tree going here. I'm sure all these items are important. I'm sure there are constituents that are really fighting for them. But it just seems like it's a pretty long list of items that would be nice to have in a lot of cases and maybe not priorities. And to the extent they are priorities, I think they can be funded. Many of these can't be implemented within a year. So they would draw from that incremental tax that we're getting above and beyond our current needs, but far less than $10 per 10,000, I think.
And Stephen, just as an example, we did lower the UUT. I mean, Portola Valley is an example of that. We lowered the UUT. So we did it. And then we had to raise it back up eventually because the property taxes weren't covering it. So
it happens. It's just rare.
So at least there's a sample size of one. The other thing I would suggest is, Tony, if you put back your presentation, I think there's a little confusion about, how much is going in. Like my understanding of that list and the council's understanding of that list was this was like all the kinds of things that people have asked for. Not these are all the things that are going to get paid for with this, but just to give people a sense for the projects that have been brought up are not cheap. And so I don't think the council would pass half. I mean, again, this is my personal opinion as a council member. I don't think we'd pass half the things that are on this list, but they are things that have come up. And the general public needs to understand that these things don't come for free. So I think that's the way I interpret this list, not this is the list that this tax is going to pay. But, you know, I think it was I don't know, maybe the third. So past that one, maybe like 2 down from that. So this one was more of, you know, putting into the capital more like 600,000 to 900,000, and 300 if that's already taken out, because that has to go to the roads if we want to meet our obligations. So if you believe that, then and Tony was saying, you know, maybe 750 kind of makes sense. Then that's 400,000 going to capital. We've got a lot of capital projects to do. It's going to take us a long time at adding 400K to capital to actually pay for these $1 million projects. So I don't think there was any sense, at least for me, when I was sitting at the council dais, that somehow we were going to magically get millions of dollars to pay for capital improvements. So that I sort of took this list and I sort of thought of the sheriff's services as if you magically filled that hole, you know, the sheriff's service hole, that would sort of put us back where we started, you know, like before that, like how we were able to operate the town before. So that was sort of 700,000 of that sort of, you know, another way to think of it, 700,000 kind of goes to the deficit, and then you get an additional 700,000. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to think about these numbers crudely, but that's sort of when I looked at these, and then the range there was sort of the addition of the left side and the right side. So that, you know, from a council's point of view, or at least again, from a council member's point of view, that set of numbers didn't seem totally, you know, like, wow, this is super rich. It seemed more like getting us back to where we were, starting to fund capital projects and acknowledging that government expenses go up. And unfortunately, they go up pretty fast. I have to say, again, as a council member, it's frustrating to me how fast government expenses go up. But we don't have a lot of control over that. A lot of it is unfunded mandates from the state. So, thank you.
Thanks. I will just point out that when you look at the number of property transfers over the last 5 years, we had 80 in 2020 and 76 in 2021, and those were anomalous by about a factor of 2 probably because of COVID and people changing their location and so on and so forth, making life changes. Last 3 years, it's been about 40. So 41, 38, 43. And when you look at total value and apply, say, a 1% rate to that, we would get respectively from 2020, 3.3 million, 2.4 million, 1.9 million, 2.0 million. Now, on the one hand, I don't think property values are going to go down in Portola Valley. Tech has grown 5-fold as a share of the global economy in the last 30 years, and it's all centered here, which is good for us for the economy and bad for us from the standpoint of affording a house. But the number of sales can fluctuate, right? On the upside, if there's something like a COVID, but potentially on the down session. So we just have to allow for some lumpiness in the revenue.
So I'm going to, I've got 3 or 4 things to get through. I don't think take long on most of them. When we first started this whole discussion about some kind of a ballot measure, and I wrote the council about this quite a bit on the online about public comment. I started out thinking about what kind of tax would be equitable in Portola Valley, and I quickly didn't like the property transfer tax because in an average year, 2 to 3% of homeowners sell a house over 10 years. That's still less than a quarter of the population. Some of those people actually may be buying and selling more than once in a 10-year time period. So you have a relatively small percentage, minority of the town paying for a long time, the incremental revenue we're trying to get. And that just didn't feel right to me. So I proposed a alternate, which would be an increase in the UUT that already exists, because at least that's spread across everybody and it's more equitable in that sense. Didn't like the fact that it's not tax deductible, which I always care about. And it was clear to me that wasn't going to work with the council. So I suggested that maybe they could put it on the ballot as a alternative tax measure. That kind of gets to the point I think a couple of us have made, that going with a really big transfer tax might be risky. If you had another proposal on there, it might get 50+1, and that might be able to go into effect, so you have something. So I still think that's worth considering. I thought that was more worth considering when Jarvis initiative was still on the ballot. I'm with Tony on this, even though it's not on the ballot this year. That Jarvis organization is going to look at every proposed real property transfer tax in the state, and there's probably a lot of them, and they're very sophisticated, and they're going to go hard after trying to kill every single one of them. So just because they pulled their ballot measure, all the money they were going to probably spend trying to pass that can now go towards picking off individual towns. So we just have to be prepared for that if that's the route we go. So let's put all that aside. Especially for these capital projects, they're big numbers, they're long-lived assets. Whether we get a property tax or transfer tax passed or not, I think over the next year we ought to look what a muni bond would look like, spread over 30 years or whatever, to fund some of that stuff, to take some of the pressure off of what, and we're heaping a lot of pressure on this single tax measure we're trying to get passed next month. So it's worth looking into, given the list that Tony presented here tonight. So that's all I have to share about the measure itself. I'm glad Darcy's here, because I did have some thoughts about how we're, and the mayor's here too, some thoughts about how we talk about the setup for the town, whatever we're going to propose, how we talk about it and write it and so forth. Because we know that's going to be quite important. People are going to listen to what people in town who are managing the city say and how they say it. So I'm going to use this. I'm not really picking on it, but I want to use it as an example to make my point. So we have, this is the updated, I think this came out last month, the Post. This is online. It was mailed to everybody. I'm sure everybody in town has seen it. And I'm stepping off this group, and I'm thinking about how are the voters perceiving what's going on, because that's what we're trying to appeal to. And what are they going to think when they read what we're proposing, or the way we're talking about it? So, for example, on here we talk about the town budget update, concerns about the town's future autonomy. If I was a town resident, I probably wouldn't have think, is our autonomy in trouble? I'm not sure that is a issue that I would have popped in my brain to be worried about. I don't think that's an issue quite honestly, we have to worry about. But before I explain why, I don't want people voting based on whether they think the town will be able to survive as an entity that can control itself. I don't think that was ever an issue. I mean, the ways that could happen, and Darcy knows more about this than I do, but I spent some time looking into, like, how can a town lose its autonomy, whatever we think about that. And the two main areas have to do with, managing your finances, and you mismanage your finances, and in the worst case, you go bankrupt. And in other cases, maybe you do a disincorporation. So I actually did a little research on that, and I was wondering first of all, in general, I don't think we're in deep trouble, but I wondered how many towns or cities in California have gotten to financial trouble to the point where they had to disincorporate, which it's not the only way. And Tony's giving me the finger, which I anticipated, which is, there
This,
was,
the index finger.
yeah. So, yeah, right. Yeah, make sure you count that he's got all his other fingers. So what I was quite surprised, I thought this would be not uncommon. It's extremely uncommon. In fact, in the last 50 years, there have been zero, according to the data I was looking at, the AI could be hallucinating, who knows? But zero towns or cities have disincorporated in the last 50 years. Going back 53 years, there was a town,
Riverside.
Cabazon, down in Southern California that did disincorporate. I know that town because I drive down there to my house in Southern California. It's right along the freeway where they now have a big Morongo casino and a outlet mall, which I presume was the solution they came up with to solve their financial problems. And they're nothing like our town. I mean, these are small, probably low income places. So it is extremely unlikely. I mean, it hasn't happened for most of us in our adult lifetime that this would happen. So I don't like the idea of raising financial stability, I guess, is okay. I don't like raising the issue of, are we going to lose autonomy because we're somehow not doing what we need to do with our funds. So I just want us to not talk that way about autonomy. What I'd rather us, when we talk about whatever measure we come up with, if it's the transfer tax, fine. The way to talk about, I think, the charter city is to, if we do it, charter city explain, a charter city provides similar or equivalent autonomy to what we have now, and that we've relied on and has treated us well for the last, since 1964. So we're not differentiating the autonomy issue there, but it allows us to propose a transfer tax. So take the autonomy thing out of it, saying we're expecting autonomy under whatever scenario we come up with, because I believe we're going to be autonomous. The other thing that's been brought up, at least in this note, was about local control as it affects zoning decisions and so forth. And again, I could be corrected on this. I could only find that, we could lose control over zoning decisions. Maybe if you disincorporate, you lose it. But the other way is if you don't adhere to the state mandates and you don't pass a state approved housing law and all the things we spent millions of dollars in the last 5 years trying to get right. So I think we've already spent the money to make sure we're going to be compliant so we can do our own zoning and so forth. I would like, unless there's a really overwhelming reason why we want to keep talking about protecting our autonomy and not losing control of zoning, I would like to see that stripped out of everything that we talk about going forward. And like I said, and focus on the positive elements of what we're trying to do, not the things we're worried about happening. Number one, I don't think any of these bad things are going to happen. We're not going to let it happen. And number two, that just makes it harder to pass anything, because if I'm not, coming in here every month or, watching or participating from afar, and I read this and hear about this, I start thinking, why would I want to pass a tax for these people who couldn't complete their audits, and now they're saying we're in trouble with autonomy and so forth? Why do I want to give those people more control? Why do I want to turn it over to them? We're kind of arguing against ourselves, is kind of the way I see it. So that's just a suggestion for you as you put the materials together. And maybe even in terms of the way you write the ballot language, talk about autonomy in terms of the charter city would have the same autonomy things as we have now. Just bury that. And then, you're not going to bring up the zoning stuff, I don't think, in a ballot measure, and then just do the other things about what you plan to spend it on. The other caution there is, I know there's what you normally do in a ballot measure. You like to list the things that it could be spent on that are really attractive, like anything about fire prevention or evacuation. anything about emergency services, all that kind of stuff. And then at the bottom, it says, and general purposes, because that allows you to spend it on staff and consultants and the reserves and all these other things, even if the thing passes. So the reality is we know it's going to be spent on all of those things. I mean, Tony's been working the budget for a couple of years now. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we're going to be spending money on that are not just fire prevention and sheriff's contract and stuff, or the money is going to be used to backfill for that. So I think point being, let's be careful with the way we do the communications, because it end up hurting ourselves if we don't, if we make people concerned about things that are not the issues. I want people to look at this from the standpoint of what the town needs, what they themselves are willing to pay to try to preserve the type of town we have, and not worry about issues that just realistically, I don't want cluttering their minds when they're going into the booth or mailing in the ballot.
Okay, thank you. More stuff. Who haven't we heard from yet? Chris, Steve? Anything to add? Property transfer taxes, rates. Anything over here on rates, RPTT, et cetera? We have,
Maybe I'll just add a little bit to what Bill said and I'm trying to think how to position this. But look, I think the honest perception on the street is that Portola Valley finances haven't been well managed. And I know Tony, you've done a great job of getting that in line, right? But between an article in the Wall Street Journal a couple years ago, to just the general noise that's out there, and I think Bill was touching on this a bit. I think from a credibility perspective, positioning this as, more along the lines of what you were saying, Craig, hey, it's just expensive to be the town. And we have to, and the world's changed. So let's just kind of do the basics here, right? And I'm still trying. So I'd say that's if I was going to refine the positioning, I think do this with a big dose of humble pie when you're doing it, because I don't think there's a lot of confidence yet. You're doing a great job, Tony, but I still think there's, shakiness there. So let's be humble about it. I think the second thing is, I just wonder, I understand you call it the optimal rate in this presentation. I think that's the maximum rate, right? And is there a way to say we commit to spend no more than this and set a maximum rate, and then say, in fact, in the first year, we're going to do less than that, right? Say you stick with the $10 per thousand, but you say, and in fact, and our charter says we can go up to 10, but we think the fiscally responsible thing to do is to do $6 in year one and see how it goes. I'm trying to think of showing up with a message that is, we're doing a great job, people, being fiscally responsible, and we're going to continue to do that, but give us some more tools to work with. That's just an idea.
I really like that idea. I liken this to what I was talking about the cash balance as a target, and you could have a target rate that isn't your maximum rate, right, that you're going to talk to, and that the town therefore has faith in its representatives that they're going to manage toward.
So that sounds reasonable, except for you realize RPTT is your term, George, lumpy. So if you look at it, 1 year, we may, instead of having 50 transactions, we may have 100, or we may have only 20. And so looking at it, you can't really count on saying we're going to look at it and we can change it up to a maximum of 10%.
let's play with that for a second. So let's say it comes in low. That year, you've proven you can tighten the belt, you keep the belt tight, right? The next year, there's a correction, comes in high, right? Then you have a surplus for that year, but you maybe put it towards reserves. I'm just saying that it is lumpy. I fully agree with you. So just make it part of the fiscal management and say, we now have a new tool. It may be a lumpy tool. Not everybody will understand that, but we promise to manage it every year. And that's part of the new town charter. And look, if it comes in too low, it comes in too low. You don't do the capital project, right? If it comes in high, you push the capital projects through. This is the way businesses operate all the time. You have a good year, lots of capital spending. Bad year, tighten the belt. You know, less consultant spend, no capital projects. I like that mindset. Just say.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, if we combine that with this idea that the reserve policy is a 20% minimum, but the target is higher than that. I threw out 60%, our old reserve limit. That would allow you to spend between those levels to smooth out some of the lumpiness based on, yeah, we had a recession last year. We had half the usual number of sales, but the economy's recovering. So we can, be reasonably sure that we can keep spending at a moderate level on our longer term commitments here because it should even out next year.
We could also tie a percentage of revenue instead of a dollar amount in case if it comes in too low. You can say, we're only going to spend up to 70% of revenue or, just in case, just for volatility purposes. Yeah.
I think you get it, right? I'm messaging.
Yeah.
Give us more financial management tools.
Mhm.
And we're proving to you we're really good at this.
Yeah.
But give us one more tool and we'll report on that as well. And you can watch us do.
Yeah. And I know I didn't say it tonight, but we've had previous meetings and previous presentations where I have talked about our reserve level and that it is a policy discussion that will be needed on what the right reserve level is going to be. Yes, we did lower it to 20%. So that was so we can spend and cover our budget. But yeah, we're getting closer to the 20% level than we are to 30.
Actually, Mark and I were the two that were assigned to the reserve policy subcommittee a couple years ago, and I think we came up with a range of 25% up to 60%, and our argument was around the amount was we don't really know what the right number is. I mean, we kept thinking of what's a scenario in which we really are in trouble in we kept going back to the El Nino year, which I remember. But I think all of us who were in town remember it, although that was a big issue financially. And I think town borrowed some money and we found some grants and all that kind of stuff. So the way you manage the really bad scenarios, fire, whatever, is you're going to go looking for other free money or sources of money or low cost loans or something that aren't even in our tool bag that we're planning to use right now. And that's kind of the way you have to, because we're not going to be able to get backing into having a reserve big enough to bail us out if,
and we have not had a long-term fiscal spending plan in place. And again, I've also talked about having that in place as well. And as well as a 5-year CIP plan, as well as, so we've had these policy discussions. It's just when you start having those discussions, the first thing you look at is how much money do we have to spend? And right now we don't. So it's, but these are things that I would like to implement in regards to the budget processes. Here's our fiscal spending plan over the next 5 years. Here's the things that we have to cover in year 3. Here's the things we have to cover in year 4. And then our CIP plan is we've got 5 years, 10 years, whatever, that they're identified, and also how we're going to pay for these. But yeah, these are a lot of policy discussions and direction that, yes, the finance committee is going to be a key part in, but it ultimately it's going to be direction and the council is going to have to provide.
Yeah, and I just want to point out for those who mentioned that you tend to spend all available tax revenues. We talked about reducing the UUT, and I think that initiated with you, Bill, as I recall, years and years ago, as we were accumulating cash, pointing out that, look, the cash doesn't belong in the government, that we don't need.
I should have shut up back then.
Cash balance, right? Yeah, yeah. Who knew we would have needed it? But it was a fair point, which is to say we're not in the business of accumulating cash reserves from taxpayers. You want to take the money you need to deliver the services that the voters expect, and then have, rainy day funds so that you don't run out of money. But apart from that, give it back. And we did in the form of reducing the UUT. And then unfortunately, inflation perked up and other things transpired that have led us to where we are at the moment. But, I don't think any of us are fans of just spending more money because we have it.
Right.
Really good discussion. Any more?
Are we, as a committee, coming up with some sort of support or advice? No.
I don't think we need a resolution. Obviously, it's the town council that has the vote that matters. I think my sense is the town council members will pay attention to this conversation, as will members of the public, and that will factor into their thinking through the issues and making the inevitable trade-off that the elected representatives get to make of, is it $6 or $8 or $10 or UUT or what?
Thankfully, we don't have the job of trying to get a unanimity on anything. Our job, as I remember talking to the mayor about last night, is to come up with alternatives and seek out, problems and issues and, propose solutions, and then leave it to the council to kind of sort it all out.
But just to sum up where I am, I'm in favor of making certain that whatever the heavy lift is, it's something that makes sense for the voters, obviously, and for the representatives. It's a number that is sufficiently large that we can actually fix this for a substantial period of time. Nothing in life is permanent, but at least for the foreseeable future. And where we maintain the flexibility and indeed the intent of going below the maximum. And the maximum is there to help recover and to allow for unanticipated inflation, et cetera, but where we go below whatever that number is. Because the worst thing I think would be to go through a heavy lift, do all the Sturm and Drang, get something passed, and then be more or less in the same pickle, just at a lower level of intensity, sort of in an ongoing permanent basis. I mean, fiscal discipline is good. You want to be constrained, but you don't want to be in a position where you, for example, can't resurface roads because you can't fund your portion of government grant program.
And I just want to say thank you for this discussion. I mean, this is exactly what the council. I mean, I think it's super useful to get the breadth. I think the idea of the reserve sort of minimum and then a reserve target, that makes a lot of sense to me as a way to deal with the lumpiness. And then, where we stand on sort of the capital stuff. I mean, the council will have to have a discussion, but this is super helpful. So thank you. As always, you guys are a valuable resource to the town. So it's very much appreciated.
Well, thank you for that. And with that, on this very muggy, humid, non-Portola Valley-like day, are we ready to adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned at 5:42. Thank you.